Okay, just been messing with my settings and stuff, and I think we're good. You should be able to hear the game just a bit and me pretty comfortably over the top. We're not going to mess around with separate tracks or editing today, this is to get me back into it. Maybe we can just play the game at a nice pace, maybe I can talk a lot, it's been a bit. I have a lot I want to say, as always, and it's just more Halo. So, thoughts on Halo, meta thoughts on Halo and gamers, what's been on my mind lately? A lot. I never stop looking into these things. Even if I'm not talking, I'm thinking about things I could be talking about. And now it's been a while, but here we are at the 5th level of Halo, the one with all the concrete corridors. People say that it's the meme that this game gets horribly repetitive and that this level does, but no, I really think that this is a pretty brilliant level of the game. It's kind of the end of its first act if you think of it as being a game in 2 acts, which I do. And yeah, that's just a nice weird little scene to stage this opening, set us up. We aerial insert from underground or whatever it is they say, and then we're down here at this barely guarded door to nowhere. And it's just got the Halo stuff already. It's a little patrol because they didn't expect us, but they still have shields and things, which they weren't ready for. The grunts would of course run to these if they got a chance, but I killed them all. I don't know if I've shown this off. Ballistic weapons bounce off of these, and yes, that's not just an effect, they actually... I can shoot myself with the reflections. It's not something you'll ever organically use, but the fact that it's there is just cool. And look, the grunty kind of ducks down when he thinks he's behind cover. We can play with this guy for a second since he's not a danger. I was just in a thread on V today. Yes, I still go to V. And what we were discussing was Halo came up and how no one's going to make a successor to Halo even though it's struggling. Sorry, real quick, let me just make sure that yes, we are recording. Just the one program, no fuss there. No one is replacing Halo, and yeah, I just said my usual thing and didn't get replies because it's V, but yeah, Halo, it's built differently to the rest of them. Show me the other first-person shooter where, you know, I can leave an entity alive and he'll actually do vaguely interesting things. I just spontaneously started watching this guy and I'm having fun doing it. This is an advantage to playing on easy or normal. You can actually do this and not be in any danger. And just the way that he feels very solidly grounded in the world and the way he's constantly reacting and playing off of what I'm doing, not just in a generic like throw damage around and spaz out dodging way, but like, I don't know, it just feels like he's got a lot more life in him. He's not just a kind of moving target. If I stop and look at something in like Doom 2016 or God help us, Doom Eternal, am I going to get any kind of tactile sense from him? I've seen that discussed in relation to movies recently as well, how nothing feels real. It's very interesting how different mediums are kind of converging on that, even like furniture you might say in cars, they feel somehow less solid lately. Isn't that cool? His gun overheated that shield. There's a general move away from that kind of old tactility, and video games, even though nothing is real, they also have that. Okay, Mr. Grunt, I'm probably boring the poor people now. Sorry, we're going to put you down and keep moving. Now, what have I been doing lately? I invaded another forum and an interesting subject came up, which is kind of relevant to all this stuff I'm doing here. The subject of Tim Rogers came up. Do you know him? The action button guy. The weird potato-faced like guy who used to write for Kotaku and such. He lived in Japan and he was writing way back in like the classic games journalism era. One of those boring, obnoxious people who's responsible for Gamergate. Bang! Look at that, we're playing a game with optional stealth. It's like Far Cry 3. Nobody gives Halo credit for that, but you can do all kinds of reactive stuff to break your way into a scene. Now that guy's seen us and is afraid. This glass is bulletproof, good for me. And I've taken out the elites, so all the grunts are just going to panic and be useless in this room now. This game, people are starting to give it more credit for how well it just works. The grunt elite jackal split is just such a brilliant setup for all kinds of encounters which can play out 100 different ways. it's really better than even like a game considered classically modular like Doom, in the sense of you can't really create an elaborate fixed puzzle. That's the strength of Doom, like Sunlust, as I showed off on this channel. You really can. It's more predictable what things will do in Doom, but not entirely, so it's kind of, you can basically create a puzzle using the different enemies and such as parts with the correct answer. Cortana's saying things. They have the region secured. Yes, we went to this little underground place, if you remember the story, and we weren't sure what would be here, but the Covenant, they're here too. They're on top of things. They're trying to learn all about this place. Anyway, I've been going off on so many tangents already. I always start up not really sure what I'll say, and then like 20 subjects come to me. I'm doing the circular bounce. Let's try to keep moving. But yes, this level, concrete corridors at first. We're in this kind of, we have that big weird cavern, then these weird kind of modular looking rooms in the Forerunner architecture. Oh, that reminds me, you know what we can do now? Look, here is the... Oh dear, here is Forerunner architecture again, according to 343 Studios. Look at this horrible, horrible mess. We are now inside a gaming PC. Just the level of detail goes from like, okay, Prometheus Man designed this, to, okay, Alienware designed this. And even the gun is just like glowing. We're in this weird blue 5-gum hue. What is this? Like, no, this is how this scene is meant to be lit. Yes, interesting line from Cortana. If this place is some kind of practically oriented space station thing, why does it have snow? And look at those guys. There's a ship full of Marines. If we zoom in, you can actually see them. They're being physically shot at by these guys. And there's a car, and is there already a guy hanging off that gun while it's in flight? That would be very scary if so. But I'll show you in a second something that I think is very cool about this level. Oh no, look out, Mr. Elite. Let me just clear this bridge and I can show you something, and then I promise, this is what happens when I don't do the circle thing, I get too much stuff on my mind. We'll get back to Tim Sweeney. I wrote like pages about him. I have things on my mind. Okay, the motion sensor says there's a few more. Come on, as if I didn't get that guy. There we go. And you off the edge. Or not, fine. And more of them are under my feet, I think. Are they? Maybe not. Oh, there they are. People say the assault rifle's not useful. I beat the game on Legendary using this thing a lot. Of course on normal every gun shreds, but it's pretty reasonable about letting you use everything. Did that gold elite just dive off the edge and die? Or is he around here waiting to kill me? I think he might have dove off the edge. That's very funny. So much for him. Okay, now I guess I have two things to show you. One will be Mr. Gold Elite. Yep, there he is. That's not like a every time thing. I'm pretty sure that's the first time I've seen him accidentally do that. And yeah, there's a bunch of Marines who got out of the Banshee and are just kind of hanging around down there now. You can actually see them spontaneously moving. That's a very cool thing about Halo, just that its engine allows everything to be done, you know, not faked. And that's something else I could talk about recently, different games I've been looking at, but only so many subjects at a time. They dropped off a Warthog down there, Mr. Gold Elite, because he does not just follow a strict script, he is actually, like, he has physics, he has goals, he tried to run towards us and basically bounced off this ledge to his death. That's very, very funny. But anyway, yes, sorry if you're hanging on in suspense for this. I was talking about Tim Rogers. He is an interesting figure who I don't like. I compare him to someone else who I don't like in that written discussion. I compare him to Hazel, and, you know, you either know who Hazel is or you don't. If you look up something like Hazel Fully Cooley, Hazel Sonic, you'll find Hazel. Hazel is someone I don't like because Hazel is just like Tim Rogers, only in the case of Hazel, it's a lot more... That was rather chaotic. Again, just systems playing out organically against themselves make all kinds of interesting things happen in this game. But yeah, Hazel is someone who puts on this show of kind of conversational, let me just talk about what this means to me with you kind of things, but I've even seen this put by a Hazel fan in a way that basically gave the game away, even though they didn't mean it that way. Someone said that they're a fan of Hazel's style, and they described that as kind of simulated conversation. And that's the first part of what I find sinister about this. Basically, yes, Hazel is someone who talks about media. That's almost a tainted word now because of a certain kind of person who uses it. I used it in place of art because it leads readily into multimedia and sidesteps the obnoxious video issue of, oh, video games can't be art or so on. Movies aren't art, but cinema are, and that's just an obnoxious thing. If that comes up, I'm pretty ready to just say, whatever you want to be art is art, whatever isn't. That, or if you want to bully someone and make them make an idiot out of themselves, you ask them why something is or isn't. The answer is always very, very stupid. But anyway, Hazel, a fellow media appreciator, like me almost in some ways perhaps. Hazel simulates a conversation, but if you really watched my early videos, especially the Forbidden Chapter 0 of this Halo thing, I think I called it Season 0 when my mic was destroying the recording. What I was saying a lot of was that, you know, on one hand, not editing makes this very easy to do. It's going to encourage my lazy, degenerate ass to actually finish projects, but at the same time, by not editing, I'm actually presenting the thing as it comes to me. I don't really have room to manipulate you or opportunity to. I'm actually playing off the thing which is as it is in front of me. This keeps me grounded in the sense of like, okay, I'm prompted by what's actually there. If you listen to me, you read what I say, you know that I think a lot of gamer culture is basically memes that took on lives of their own. When people talk about video games, there's often an idea of what the thing is, which at some point along the way got completely, oh god, the ambience is just destroyed, isn't it? Got completely out of hand and just has nothing to do with the thing as it actually is. And yeah, I can avoid that comfortably by being right here, and you know, I'm probably going to be relatively honest. I can't distract you or sidestep you, and you know, this is actually a conversation, whereas as the one well-meaning fan put it about Hazel, that's different to a simulated conversation. And why would you simulate a conversation? I might be the only one who finds that deeply sinister. Basically, if someone is acting kind of like, oh, it's all just coming out, me and you, we're so intimate right now, but you know, it's one-sided. You aren't actually there with them. You don't know them. And, you know, they can cultivate and curate every single thing which reaches you. That's not a conversation. That's a speech, or like, you know, it's like a president's goddamn fireside chat, you know. That's Hazel talking about Fully Coolly with you. Hazel's fireside chat. Hazel has a goddamn script, and Hazel is scripting because Hazel has a goddamn agenda. And then the conversational tone, frankly, it's there to disarm you. And it might sound absurd to say disarm, as that suggests a kind of sinister intent, but isn't it cool? I could have just shot the first one and started this like a gunfight, but also kind of Bungie's clue leading with the sleeping guys. You know, these guys won't all kind of wake up and go alert until I give them a reason to. But anyway, yes, people like Tim Rogers, when they put on the game of, oh, well, I'm just here kind of spilling my guts out to you what all this stuff is to me. Just think like, okay, what Tim is doing is more complex, but like the general problem of the form is that it's sort of like a lie which has the kind of a sinister, distorted effect of what I intend to gain here, where I'm speaking straight to you over the game because I mean to be straight to you. Whereas if you don't actually want to be straight with someone, but you want to get the kind of rhetorical effect, not that I'm trying to persuade, you either understand me or I don't, and if you disagree with me, I don't care. I don't want people who disagree with me but don't understand me, but I think that Tim Rogers does. I'm sorry if I'm bouncing around. I have got this down in writing. Gee, maybe I'll even just link the bloody thread while I was talking about this if it gets really out of hand and you're curious. But anyway, yes, if you adopt a conversational tone but are curating what you say, you can basically use the kind of trust people will instinctively have for this kind of, oh, I'm just so charming, I'm just being myself, I'm so like emotionally vulnerable and open right now. People instinctively trust that, I think, and it gets really disgusting and excessive with Tim Rogers, where he is a very neurotic man if you've seen his action button videos and read his old writing, and especially if you've read old V rumors about what he used to be before he's famous. I won't talk at length about those, but those are interesting. Maybe it'll come up. But anyway, what was I saying? And oh no, look at our marine friends who we saw from above. They're now under attack in a big organic scenario where they need our help. Vehicles and turrets going off. This is a brilliant Halo moment. And I could be talking about Tim, but maybe we'll give that a second. Props to the Marine who threw that, and look at these guys. They're now using stuff like alien weapons because this situation is getting out of hand. Get in, boys. We have stuff to kill. Actually, no. Leave this one to me. Yeah, so you can basically... The effect of speaking candidly... Well, frankly, it's not a lot of the time. Like, I don't have, like, a big loyal audience of people who, like, emotionally fall for me, but an impression that you can make, especially if you kind of couch things in subtly appealing ways, you make yourself vulnerable, or you play a kind of role people want to see. People do ultimately want to be lied to for a large part. There are certain roles people are looking for to be filled, and, you know, if you just meet them halfway, they will so eagerly fall on you if you basically give them what they want, which is, you know, going back to what I wrote about Sphere Hunter years ago, another pioneer in this kind of thing. Sphere Hunter is, of course, kind of being what they wish was in the world to a large extent. Look at that guy's flip! I love the bizarre physics in this game. They're never more bizarre than this one. They become more grounded in a less fun way in the sequels. Also, look at the Jackal's shield repelling the goddamn 50 cal from the Warthog. That's amazing. Anyway, what was I saying? Okay, that Marine is pleased with himself, and look at that guy driving a Ghost all by himself to keep up with us. Good job, buddy. Oh, and what's around this corner? Oh god, ice, which is impossible to drive on, more Marines, and a goddamn tank. Awesome. Let's see if we can save our buddies here. Look out for that grenade, guys. Look out for this Warthog. Look out for the 50 cal. Remember, this is the concrete corridor level, allegedly. This is the most boring level ever in a video game. Look at how much stuff is going on right now. Isn't this great? And we could rerun this scene. I could reload it and play it out 100 different times and 100 different things would go on. But I did tell you I was going to talk about Mr. Sweeney. Hello, Sergeant from Aliens. Let's load up on more rockets because they're fun. I always enjoy them. Let's get a health thing. Some poor Marines didn't make it. Let's see what this scene looks like if I flip the colors. Again, there's a weird filter hue. It's like the Blu-ray release of The Matrix or something. Or was it the DVD where they turned The Matrix green? Anyway, look at this. We've got a whole team of guys who want to join in on the tank party, so let's go do that. Yeah, we'll be good for a while. Nothing's gonna mess with us. Okay, I honestly don't remember this path forking. That's kind of interesting. But anyway, yeah, we're set. We're in the tank now. I don't have to think for a bit, so watch this thing just blow things up with fun physics. We're on a... Again, this is like an anti-old Bungie moment where, like, you know, in Myth, whenever you get a cool new thing, they ramp up some weird, obnoxious challenge that's hard to deal with, basically so that you can't have fun with it, whereas this game just decides, okay, the tank isn't like a unique challenge level. The point of a tank level is just that you have fun. I think the Marines aren't having fun, though. We're getting shot from everywhere at once. Sorry, guys. You can kill some of them if you want to be helpful. Come on, team, we can do it. I'm sorry, we'll get to Tim Rogers eventually. I having fun at least. Are you having fun watching, or are you just using this as a podcast? If you do, that's alright. I know some people do. But yeah, I'll try to keep up the pace, and that might mean that discussions fall to the wayside instead of the video game for a change. Maybe that's better. I know things got a bit absurd with how long I could spend jumping around in circles with these. But again, it's kind of the idea of this, which is the game as it comes to me, and that comes with a lot of thoughts, and yeah. Well, let's take both big guns, why not? I was expecting a health thing here, but oh well. Come on, Marines who haven't died yet, back on we get. More stuff to do. Gee, we sure made a mess of those guys. You know, we lost like 2 Marines, but we got them a lot better. 2 Marines for like all of them. You know what, we didn't even need to shoot that, we can just go down. Hey, hunters. That's one, and... oh no, they got the sergeant from Aliens. Come on, we can run him down. Come on. Oh man, he's pretty nimble with that jump, it's not just for show. I also like the Marine grenade dive, but that's less useful. Hunters, they're genuinely kinda... look at him go. This guy's blue and spiky because he's Sonic. Oh, never mind, we killed him. Look out, Marine. Whoop. There he goes, he does his dodge. And I can just flip this thing like we're on the moon, because why not? Anyway, yes, Tim Rogers' whole thing is, to put it bluntly, affected emotional incontinence, where, like me, he'll tell you what a work means to him specifically, but, you know, I just let it prompt me and let it all come out spontaneously, whereas Tim Rogers goes to his little fortress hideaway and, you know, he writes and edits and writes and edits and spends months at a time doing something on a particular game, and, you know, some idiots will call that professional, but yeah, the thing about a professional production is that it necessarily closes the door on this kind of personal intimacy that you get from, you know, actually being there with someone. And I will say that even though I'm not trying to be your friend here, if you want to be my friend, that's fine, but, you know, actually talk to me, like write comments and stuff, and we can talk and actually have a real personal connection. What would not be a real personal connection would be if I just, you know, got out my Microsoft Word and my editing software and I just started, you know, writing out this gigantic monologue about, which may or may not be based on things which may or may not have happened to me, more or less maybe possibly as they happened. I'm doing this for months and months, and then I serve you up some finished thing, and we never have a personal interaction, me and you, but what I'm saying sounds so damn serious and emotional, and I've been talking to you hypnotically for like 7 hours if I'm Tim Sweeney. You can fall into this spot of like feeling like you know me, and then you just kind of take everything I'm saying. And that's basically the Hazel and action button modus operandi, or whatever we call it, but that begs the question of, okay, if he's kind of being a cynical manipulator, to what end? Is he just basically making up melodramatic personal relationships with silly meme games that people are going to watch video essays on for the sake of viewership? Yes and no, not exactly. Rogers has always been kind of a talkative, neurotic, oversharing weirdo. To some extent it is who he is, but basically he's a very, like, neurotic, thoughtful person who will have a lot to say about any given subject, but he's not this, like, quaint, emotional, kind of, like, nerdy, emotional wreck guy who's all vulnerable, who you want to get close to. He's more like the Patrick Bateman of video games, or, you know, more accurately, like an artless Bret Easton Ellis, the guy who wrote American Psycho, where he's just like a giant neurotic nerd who is seething with rage at all times. And that's the impression I get of him, and he's basically selling you a sanitized character version of himself in videos. He uses emotional depth, which is real, to create a compelling story, but, you know, it's very much refined for the audience he expects to get and who he wants to have. And, you know, if it was just about views, honestly, that'd be fine, just turning personal accounts of video games into soap opera so idiots give you ad revenue. I could get into that just fine, but that's not what he's doing. I mentioned briefly I've read on V kind of extreme things about his personal life before, Kotaku and all that, and I don't mean to air specifics here, I think that's very lame, just it affirmed an impression I got of him, and I want to talk about that impression, which is that he basically sounds like a kind of Gen X edgelord kind of guy, like the kind of Opie and Anthony kind of Patton Oswalt type of guy. Patton Oswalt is who he really reminds me of. And if you don't know the kind of deeper lore on Patton Oswalt, he presents as like an oofy doofy, like his character in King of the Hill, like, ah shucks guys, things just don't quite work out for Patton, do they? I'm a bit goofy, but like look at who in like the comedian circles Patton Oswalt is friends with. He's friends with like Anthony Cumia and from Anthony and Opie and Anthony, friends with Patrice O'Neill, friends with goddamn Nick Bougas, who creates the A. Wyatt Mann cartoons. I swear to God, you can find photos of the guy who makes those with his arms around Patton Oswalt, which is very, very funny. Point basically being that Patton Oswalt is a giant angry edgelord. He's kind of nerdy and funny, but you know, the humor comes from observation. And if you're observing people in like the 21st century, like Patton Oswalt deeply hates the average person. He's that kind of guy. But you know, he knows how to turn it down for TV and basically play like, haha, he's your nerdy, hopeless dweeb friend. But, you know, what is your nerdy, hopeless dweeb friend thinking inside? Basically two possible things. He either hates you or is like desperately denying that he hates you and basically making himself your bitch to avoid upsetting you. The two paths for an intelligent man, basically, do you sell out and serve your oppressors, or do you stay pure and hate everyone? Opie and Anthony, they're like that kind of relatively the best of that generation, guys who stayed fairly pure, if nothing else, and just, you know, just raged about how awful normal people are, and did what they could about that, and frankly it wasn't too much, but I don't hold much against those guys because basically, imagine being like an angry nerd before the internet. Your life is basically hell. So you really have to sympathize with Patton Oswalt and stuff. And Tim Schafer, I really think he's basically the exact same personality type. He's just this kind of seething nerd who had no place in the world. That's why he got into Japanese media and why he moved to Japan and so on. He couches it in very mild terms and eventually wrote a very deeply anti-Japanese giant blog post for Kotaku on why he eventually left the country, which I don't really think was entirely true, or at least not honest or fair entirely. It kind of gives the game away. He's a giant nerd who hated America and fled to Japan for some peace, who eventually down the line starts writing about how awful Japanese people are. You know, he doesn't call them awful, he plays it up as like, oh well, I would just kind of get sick of every place. Just shut up. If all places are the same, just that's not how this works. You came there from America because you hate America and like them more, but you can't say that. I'm sorry, that's an argument that really demands specifics. The short answer where I'm going is he is the type who is basically like us but betrayed us. You know the type. I could name any number of people. Just all the usual punching bags, just basically the traitors, the conservatives, the various kinds of like Norwood people, basically. People who decided to serve the regime and just shaved off their anger and used their powers of observation, which basically make them different, make them natural enemies of the regime to kind of bolster it in a very sinister way. That's Hazel, that's Tim, and, you know, that's the kind of evil, negative potential downside of not talking about things as they come to you. You can just basically, it gives you room to lie and manipulate, and yeah, there are a lot of sinister reasons to manipulate that wouldn't occur to a lot of people. And well, what is Hazel? To put it bluntly, Hazel is someone who is a type of person who isn't really allowed to be themselves or enjoy things earnestly. But Hazel found an out, and we'll say at least a part of that out is kind of sentimentalizing their relationship with various things that are important to them in a way which denies any essential difference between them and American things, much like how Tim Schafer says, like, oh, I'd get sick of any given place eventually. Like, America, Japan, all basically the same. I get sick of it all eventually. Like, no, Tim, you hate America. I know you do. And Hazel's very much like, okay, Hazel, you clearly are like a very... Like, America burned you hard and would give you nothing, and you found refuge in Japan, but you play it all up as this, oh, it's all this big, mysterious nothing. I'm just kind of living in the moment, taking it as it comes. No, you know exactly why these things are better than other things, and you're basically playing that down on purpose. Because it's the only way you can get any legitimacy from above while, you know, still being allowed to enjoy them. You want to be an official, endorsed enjoyer of the thing, and you want to basically be yourself at the same time. And you can't do that without reinventing yourself, we'll put it. And that's what Tim has done, that's what Hazel has done, and if you look at these channels, you'll see that Hazel is a more extreme reinvention than Tim, but in the case of Tim, it's more subtle, and some people basically don't get it and almost don't believe me when I say it's happening, but they need, like, the comparisons drawn. Hazel is the more extreme case and a useful comparison to just bring out this dynamic of basically becoming a sellout and making yourself unthreatening to the world and basically denying the essential nature of your own taste, why you like certain things, what certain differences are. Basically, if you can't... There are too many things where talking about the essential nature of what they are and their appeal just kind of... That's just not allowed. Persona non grata if you do that. It's touching too many third rails. Hello, next group of Marines, aren't we having fun? I'm sorry if I haven't been talking about the game, and if I've been agonizingly dragging this point out. I know some of you like listening to me at length. Maybe I'll just link the bloody forum thread in this video's description so you can come read my thoughts on that at length, but... Gee, if you just enjoy listening to me go on and on, isn't this going to be a fun video for you? But, yes, so anyway... We're getting shot at, look out, Marines. Gee, look out for the friendly fire as well from other sergeant stereotype from movies. This guy's cleaning them up pretty well. Anyway, let's go through here. Startled me slightly, but we're on normal, so we're fine. Jackal was behind the rock. Did I have a greater point? I guess I just wanted to talk about... Where I would have led into that fairly quickly if I weren't an idiot is... Okay, so like the Tims and Hazels of the world, they're basically the people who recognize... The regime recognizes the power of these works that mean so much to us, and basically, if it wants to diffuse them rather than just letting the power of them overwhelm the world, like, if you like anime, the correct course of action from there is, okay, why isn't America making anime? Why isn't America like anime? It's almost like, oh geez, sorry Marine. If your taste is like radically different from that of your own culture and there's maybe perhaps deep... I just think, to put it very simply, I think that taste is of radical importance in all things. It's connected to so much else. Your preferences for any one given thing don't exist in a vacuum. It really is like, okay, you like anime and you live in America, that's almost like voting with your feet, voting with your eyes and your attention against America. That's a kind of radical thing considering how different a society and culture and set of sensibilities Japan is. So a lot of people being into that, the powers that be aren't completely moronic, and this largely just kind of emerges organically. I think it's not necessarily anyone's plan. There's a kind of urgency, which is perhaps they can't say it, perhaps they aren't even entirely aware, but there is an urgency in how appealing basically everything that's not American is to Americans. Look at these guys with different guns, isn't that cool? You should be concerned if you're a libtard or whatever and you are aware that basically the things your regime makes, complain as much as they want, we all know that America is their regime. It's appealing to no one. What a character like Tim or Hazel does is basically tries to meet this stuff halfway and create a kind of sense of camaraderie and compatibility where there is none. Like, oh, it's all a big mysterious nothing. No, 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 it's not just like your vague model of feelings. It's a different culture and different set of sensibilities, completely just destroying our own by being worlds better because of fundamental differences between us and them, which, when translated into, say, the political realm, are downright revolutionary sentiments not allowed. Hazel and Tim, they're the ones who basically diffuse that, and their weapon is this kind of affected conversation, this, in the case of Tim, it's rather disgusting, downright affected emotional incontinence. He basically acts weak as a means of disarming you so that he can basically spin subtle regime propaganda to mess with your head. Deeply evil stuff, if you ask me. Hopefully you see where I'm going with that anyway. That's like basically the opposite of what I do, where I use real spontaneity to just talk about the thing as it is, whereas they use fake spontaneity to basically earn the trust you might have for me on the grounds of how I do this, but only because they mean to abuse that trust, whereas I just do this out of sheer practical desire to convey ideas and have fun with myself, and maybe for you too, sure, but you know, not really an agenda here. This really is just the straightest way to get certain things done. And yeah, I suppose it's the straightest way to propagandize as well, but anyway, gee, this is a very long and tedious meta-media discussion, isn't it? I hope at least one of you enjoys this. If you do, leave a comment saying as much. Maybe I'll feel less bad about how this has turned out. I feel like this is a real mess of an episode. But yeah, we're back in the concrete corridor arenas. Have you gotten bored of how this stuff looks playing out behind me? I personally enjoy the layout of this level for reasons I'll talk about in a moment. To kind of wrap up the last thought, I could talk more about what this means specifically to me personally on an emotional level, and there is some of that. I could even bring in child anecdotes and so on to some extent, and maybe I will as we go, because there's really only so much to say about the game. I'm always going into meta-media and stuff. I think basically people who know me, have read my posts, followed me around a few places. You know what I think Halo is. You know what I think is the brilliance of it mechanically. What is there to talk about from here? There is basically meta-media discussion, and yeah, we can only say Tim Rogers is a liar who basically wants you to believe that your tastes, which are not reconcilable with the world you live in, actually are. Very deliberate, sinister program. He's a Gen X edgelord. Hazel is basically an edgelord of my cohort or slightly older. Again, these edgelords who basically became weak to become palatable to the regime and then play up an appearance of weakness to confuse you on top of that. Very bad stuff. What am I doing? I'm just telling it like it is, as I've been saying from the start, and there's not much more to say from that. If you have questions, say so. If you're outraged at how boring this episode has been, I hope you've been skipping along at least, and feel free to say in the comments, Anthony, this was the worst goddamn thing you've done to us. Please never make an episode this tedious again. And if you say that, I'll understand and agree. But anyway, what can we actually talk about? Let's talk about this particular level, Assault on the Control Room. For one, did you notice that the level's description in the loading screen, that's not like a weird, quirky update of this edition of the game. It always says, like, you're going to be defending the room from waves of Covenant, and then we don't get there. Two interesting thoughts come to mind from that. One is, I get the impression that this level was designed as like a giant defense level where we'd be in one location defending it with Marines at one point, and then they decided, nah, that's not quite as fun as we thought it'd be, and they turned it into a giant marathon trek. And the second thought, relating to last games they've done, not Marathon actually, it's about Myth. There is a level in Myth, the first one I believe, no wait, it's the second. Well, they both have levels of this type. A level where you defend a fixed location is very much just in the vein of what Myth is about, and understandably, since this game was basically built as a successor to Myth, they'd have designed, probably pitched a few levels on similar concepts to what they found fun in Myth, and I imagine this was one of them. They basically wanted to recreate the, like, library search mission from Myth 2 in this game, where You're protecting a guy who has to go inside a big ancient building and look for a relic. You wait outside while waves of bad guys attack you. I get the impression this was basically going to be that for Halo, where Cortana's got to like go through some records and you wait outside with Marines and more aliens come. And they just decided that wasn't working and yeah, just rebuilt it as this. I think that's interesting. And yeah, the other thing to say, what was I going to say? Well, yeah, I guess that's just it, that it doesn't resemble the description, and the description was probably of a concept they had originally, which they kept, which was to make something like Myth. Now, beyond that, there's not much else to say. Before was one of the last appearances of Marines in the game, unfortunately. Those guys I left behind at the door, I'm glad I saved most of them, I always am. But yeah, this is largely a kind of turning point in the game is approaching, and yeah, I don't mind the structure of this level. We've gone through our massive outside gauntlet where we have tanks and weird alien vehicles and just all kinds of explosions and interesting stuff going off, and oh, another Marine fell off the edge. Another elite fell off the edge. We'll look at him in a moment. But yeah, I don't mind where this level goes from here, and we're basically done with that big open Marine and aliens battle with dozens of people on each side, stuff going around. This now becomes kind of a extended series of challenges where we just go into big rooms or weird layout areas like this double bridge, and we're just fighting the classic elite jackal grunt trio over and over again in different configurations with different gear we've managed to pick up. They're arranged differently and so on. And yeah, the cool thing about this level is that you're actually over these bridges crossing where you were all the way along, and yeah, the Marines might be gone. They've despawned. We'll tell ourselves they got picked up. That'll make me feel better. But all the way down there, there's our red elite friend who didn't make it. Who got bounced off the edge, and there's his gun. That's the power of a robust physics engine. Thank you, Myth. Guys bounce off the edge of the level, they don't despawn or something. The game just simulates them all the way down to the bottom. Gives things an extra... It's not all of the tactile sense, a lot of it's just like the quality of the rendering, the weightiness of the engine, but just the consistency goes a long way to making things feel physically there. I think it's also why, say, like Mario 64 feels like a very solid game. And sensibilities check, here is what happens if we flip it to basically not Bungie vision. Everything is just a spam of detail. You can't just have cliffs, your cliffs have to be more cliffs. With giant World of Warcraft icicles. Isn't that a horrific detail? They love that kind of stuff. Idiots just horror vacui. Everything has to be... oh, there's so much I don't notice until I look closely. Just, you can't have a rock wall, now it's a gaming PC wall. Thank you, 343 Studios, you fixed it. You know how I feel about that. Why don't we just play the goddamn game? Yeah, so this whole sequence, if you don't know, a pretty major shake-up in the structure of the game is coming, and this is the kind of last exam, last dance with the classic grunt elite jackal trio. And it's a pretty nice send-off for them, I think. It's really not that long on the whole. People talk about this level like it's 6 hours long. If you know the game decently well, even on Legendary, I beat this thing in like 40 minutes, and yeah, again, it's like your last encounter with just the classic aliens who are the heart of the game, so I don't mind a kind of extended send-off to them. Like, this level, the way I've put it before, is that it's like the final exam of fighting the Covenant, where, like, yeah, you like these 3 types of aliens, you fought them in all different ways, like, okay, very last thing, we're gonna put you in a bunch of plain geometric rooms and just... yeah, just fight through them or just dab on them completely. If you have gotten good at them by this point, just enjoy them, because this is the last straight fight you're going to have with them. And I do appreciate that. It's, again, it feels like Bungie correcting their prior sensibilities, where I basically feel like you don't get enough straight time to mess with any particular idea in their old games. They have like old game design brain where it's like, okay, we can't let people get bored. We have to, like, mess with things and fundamentally shift what's going on every 20 seconds, which is very obnoxious. Like, the first level in Myth is one of my favorite just because it lets me play with the different parts of the game in a very, like, fundamentals focused way without being like, okay, now it's an escort quest underwater with a timer and you have 2 units. Like, no, that's just obnoxious. It's the main parts of the game are inherently fun. Just let me bloody play with them without having to, like, without working them into some deranged, unfun mini game. And yeah, Halo fixes that. It's like, no, the fighting the Jackal, the Grunt, and the Elite together is really, really fun. Just let me do that for a while before you stop taking your pills and go insane. So yeah, this is them doing that. They probably did think like, okay, we could make every single moment of the game a gimmick moment, but like, no, actually we're going to have some faith in ourselves. A straightforward way this game works is fun, so we can just basically let it be. Oh look, there's the last bridge we were on. The grunts over there are already dead, and there's 2 hunters wondering what happened to their friends. And yeah, they're not happy with me now, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the way. They probably won't hit me. But yeah, because they're actually at a distance and front on, I can't do the, like, noob trick of just shooting them in the spine because they won't show me their backs. Which, yeah, means they're actually a little bit dangerous at the moment. I have to get a bit creative. If I was holding onto a rocket, I'd be able to use that, but I didn't, so what's the play here? Well, Halo is a game which doesn't, like, force many particular things on you, so the smartest move here is almost certainly to just run away from them. Sticking around and fighting, it's still on normal, so I could probably just eventually find an exposed shot, but I don't need to. And yeah, we're still going through the concrete corridors hell, which this game is infamous for, but yeah, honestly, this is pretty easy. I'm still having fun, and yeah, this only goes for so long. This is, again, like basically your exam sequence against these types of aliens, and if you take it, like, out of context and just look at what happens here, it means, like, okay, you spend 10 to 15 minutes going through similar but not identical rooms, playing a game which you presumably think is fun if you've played up to this point, and every scenario is so reactive that it's basically going to be something different, so yeah, what's the problem? And you were just doing something very radically different with the tank. It's, yeah, just, this is a level that gets a lot of shit from, like, the game design crowd. It's very much the meme. If you go on V or something, people will be saying like, oh god, this whole game is terrible, it's all repeated rooms and stuff, but it's really not, and I'll spoil something that's coming. A lot of the back end of this game, it is largely for the sake of asset reuse and time, but a lot of levels are repeated. This level is repeated, you go through all of this again, but what's going on when you repeat this level is so radically different that I would say that it's just, like, not the same at all. And again, it's like a kind of combat gauntlet, but they're making you do something so different to what you were doing this time that I don't feel like cheated, like they're making me do the same thing over and over again. It's a very different scenario, which you'll see if I get around to playing more of this game. It's kind of a thought I'm just having now. Like, the whole point of this when I started it was, okay, here's all of Anthony's thoughts in this kind of, like, spontaneous conversational form or whatever, just free form video essay, whatever we want to call it. But I've made so many other videos and written so much in so many different places and so on. Is there really much I could have to say that you don't already know? Probably not. So I guess that means I can just talk about thoughts of the day, like Tim Schafer, the strange kind of dimmy creature, court eunuch who just wants to lie to you about the nature of things. That's kind of a thought of the day. That can only go for so long. And then beyond that, I suppose I can just be like Pikmin, and maybe I should just play the goddamn game and have fun showing it to you. I can relax now. Most of the fundamental Anthony thoughts are out there. No, get away from that thing. It's mine. Ah, gee, I'm actually restarting the checkpoint. I want to show you something here, so yeah, sorry about that, but we keep going, we shoot him, come on, yes, 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 mine. This is something very cool and very Halo here that you can... There are levels later on which are very much focused on these things, flying banshees, but It's basically a kind of Easter egg here that you can fly one if you're quick enough, and it trivializes the rest of this level if you do. It's kind of, if you're slow, you have to go through that door at the end there and go through 2 more of those like template rooms we were just seeing, and you'll come out down there. But if you're quick and you know that you can just run for the Banshee, and then you can just, yeah, we can just glide down or just straight across over to here, which is where the level ends. Whee! And yeah, this is what happens if I force myself not to do the circle bounce thing. I can actually beat a level in one video. And yeah, this is kind of the end of the first act of the game. Sorry if this one was a bit boring. I spent like 30 minutes to say one thing, but I assure you a lot more that I can talk about in just within the game itself is about to happen. So yeah, the next level I'll just talk about the game, I think, and I'll probably do that very soon. I just remembered something I read. I don't remember where, it may have been on V. Someone said the way that elites do their growl at you, it's consistent across every Halo game. Someone compared it to George Costanza when someone steals his Twix, and he posted a gif of that happening in that show. If you've seen Seinfeld, just, it's a very exaggerated cartoonish reaction he has, and it's very much like a characteristic of the elites. It's that big weak point which just gives you a free shot. I just think it's kind of a weird, interesting quirk they built into them, and that's the thing that always brings it to my mind when I see them roaring. It's like that silly fat man getting angry over his food. I'm sorry if that was a very dumb thing to say, just, you know, we can just play this through this thing in a more leisurely way now, and sorry if this was very rambling, but if you're one of the people who actually listens to everything I say, presumably you don't get too bothered and just enjoy the pace of my own thoughts and the way that they do come out. That's kind of the nature of this thing, I guess. If it's all very unplanned and spontaneous, sometimes my thoughts will just ramble in strange circles, but yeah, they go to some interesting places too, and honestly, I'm not too proud of this episode, but it's going up. The channel will fill with videos, and yeah, can't hit every time. And we got through a whole level of Halo, so we're that much more closer to something potentially interesting happening again. Let's watch this cutscene and then I'll call it.
This is it, Halo's control center.
Nothing too interesting here, but I assure you the next level has a lot of interesting stuff going for it. We'll have fun looking at that. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. I don't know if I will right now. Probably a bit tired. I don't actually know how long I've been recording this for. It's been a whole level, but at the pace I was I going quick? Maybe I was. Probably a lot of fun stuff I didn't comment too much on. That's what I get for trying to pick up the pace. Oh well. Master Chief, what have you found with your cool reflective visor? Here we go.
Never been better. You can't imagine the wealth of information.
Isn't Cortana looking weird here? She's talking like someone who's about to have a villainous turn. She's never been better. Her eyes are glowing. She's experiencing unlimited power.
This ring isn't a cudgel, you barbarian. It's something else.
Oh yeah, and Halo lore.
More important.
So Halo is not a cudgel, it is some kind of very important thing. It was made by Forerunners. It's a fortress world. In order to... Oh no, she's found something bad.
No, that can't be. Oh, those Covenant fools. They must have known. There must have been signs.
Must have been signs of what, Cortana? You're losing Master Chief.
Buried in this ring, something horrible, and now...
Oh no, what have those silly Covenant done? I said a turn in the game was coming.
We've got to stop the captain.
Please?
The weapons cache he's looking for. It's not really... We can't let him get inside.
Yes, Cortana has found something very bad and she can't explain, and she's not coming with us, which is a bit weird.
Before it's too late.
Last thought, I'll just get out now. They kind of try to paper over her weird behavior there with a, the novel which goes between this game and Halo 2 basically says that Cortana downloaded a civilization worth of data into her head in that moment and kind of impaired her processing power. The kind of implication you can make there if you want to cut Bungie some slack with their game which could only have 10 levels and needs this separation to happen is like, okay, say that Cortana got like shocked by the amount of data she downloaded and was slightly retarded for a moment, and regretted telling us to go without her like a minute later when she got her senses back. Okay, now isn't this really, really different to everything else that's been happening? We're in a swamp. And now we're in an Alienware swamp. They really did manage to ruin every part of the game. The kind of hue, which looks like the air is colored, is less obscene here because we're in a swamp. Presumably the air is very damp and so on, but still, it's just much better here. You can't see as far in the old graphics. The bioluminescence is very, very subtle. And yeah, it's just spookier. I don't find this spooky at all. I find this very spooky. When I was a kid, this spooked me out genuinely. So yeah, I said I'd talk about what the game means to me personally. This level probably means more to me personally than anything else, so gee, why don't you hold me accountable to that? That's what the next video will be. I won't do it right now. Gee, or maybe I even will. This video, we won't try to remember what I was writing on forums recently. It'll just be me playing this, talking about the game. And you know, so that I don't forget, I might even do it right now. Let me just stop recording this one and start uploading it, and then we'll hit the next one.